Welcome, everybody. We are going to have an interview with my dear friend and colleague, Spring Cheng, and he's going to talk with us about the nervous system and how she works with that in her work. But first, I'd just like to give you a little more of a picture of who she is. Spring is a coach and a teacher in leadership development and self-awareness. She spent the first half of her life in traditional pre-industrialized China and the latter half in the United States. After receiving a doctoral degree in molecular biology and a master's in biostatistics, she worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a data scientist. However, in her career as a scientist, her heart and spirit felt empty, and she decided to dedicate herself to reconnecting with her indigenous roots through Chinese medicine and Taoism. Later, with her partner Jo Shirley, Spring co-founded the Resonance Path Institute, where she created a holistic blend of her diverse experiences as a dancer, artist, scientist, and Chinese medicine practitioner through coaching and leadership development. Spring invented the resonance code, a rebirth of the ancient Chinese classic I Ching, the Book of Change, in the context of leadership development and conscious evolution, and authored the resonance code, empowering leaders to evolve towards wholeness. She is an advocate for integrating indigenous wisdom with modern thinking in coaching practice. She now roots her work in her native Chinese culture while spreading her influence in the Western world. And we're going to include at the end and in the written part below this video, we're going to include a link to her website and ways to get in touch with her if you want to find out more, or if you want to work with her one-on-one, or see what kinds of classes or courses she offers. So Spring, would you like to add anything to that introduction?
No, I would like to take out something.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a very full introduction already.
Okay, yeah. It is full, and you know, I would also add that you're a poet and a singer too.
Yeah,
So I
thank
have
you.
some experience with that, and so on that note, I would just like to add a little bit about how I have come to know you, because that's very relevant to what we're going to be talking about. I actually met Spring in a group, a local group, performance / transformance, artistic, multi experiential, it's completely new kind of a thing, event that we were both in, and I had never met her before, or her partner Jo. And so in this kind of multi-experiential event, we were working with artistic expression, poetry, singing, movement, and the creative process and improvisation. And so Spring and I found ourselves in a tiny group where we were immediately going to create a piece, a work of art within a few minutes, within
Yeah,
15
in 15 minutes,
minutes.
like we
15 minutes.
need to put on a show.
And then
Right.
we went right from there into performing it or sharing it with the other people. That was so delightful and exciting. And then from there, Spring offered a workshop on the resonance code work that she does. And I kind of got drawn into it when I heard her talking about the nervous system. Within the work that she does with the I Ching and resonance code and creativity, and I just was, whoa, how is she weaving all this together? And so I watched that and was deeply nourished by that, because I have some shared interest, but I'd never found how they wove together the way that she does. So that's what excited me about inviting Spring to share with us here, specifically about the nervous system and creativity and anything else you want to share on those topics. So let's just dive in then. And let me know if you'd like to talk about how do you weave nervous system work into the work that you do with clients or students or your writing.
Yeah. So I think, you and I have had a lot of conversation about nervous system, and I would like to share that the fight, flight, freeze, fawn information very soon, because I think that sits at the kind of focus of both of our interest, these different modes of how we experience our nervous system: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. But before we go into that information sharing, I would like to talk about my Taoist background. So, I grew up in China, and from very young, we have this fable story, like, Chinese culture is full of this story of wisdom. One of the story wisdom, like, really teaches there's no single, so everything in our life we experience can have positive and negative side. There's nothing that's completely positive and completely negative. So there's a story of this old man who went through, his son broke the bone, his horses got lost, and there's war and all these things. There's at the beginning looks like a bad thing, and then in the end it turned out to be a good, or beginning sounds like a good thing, it turned out to be bad. So this is something highly ingrained in my blood. So to see everything as is, beyond what we think is good and bad, or positive and negative. That's the background from which where my work emerges. So with that, can you bring up the
Let's do that. Yeah, so we're going to bring up one of the charts that Spring uses in one of her presentations. See if like that. Here we go. I'm going to back up to this one first. This kind of gives a little more of the focus on the nervous system. So can you see that? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it. So for your audience, Angela, they're probably pretty familiar with these different modes of nervous system. And so in my work, I see these modes of nervous system. Behind it, there's this what I call the primordial life energy. There are these through millions of years of biological evolution, life come up with these different modalities to regulate and cope with the environment, the stress coming from environments, not just stress, but challenge or problems in the environment. So in our current culture, a lot of people are familiar with these and learned probably from your course to distinguish these different modes. The fight is usually associated with this aggressiveness. Freeze is usually we experience is some kinds of stuckness or pain, stuckness due to the pain or some kind of wounding. And the fight is we sometimes experience as we check it out, kind of like dissociate from what's painful and what's struggling. And the fawning is less known, but it's more of a kind of like folding ourselves into whatever the situation, yielding to someone else will, or yielding to someone else wanting our wishes, and kind of let go of our own. So since at the beginning I was talking about my Taoist background, to everything in its both the dark and the bright light. So this is the results of years research of resonance code, but I come up with this map that to illuminate the gift behind these four modes of nervous system. So which I call becoming, doing, allowing, and being. Yeah. So and this is kind of the core of how I work with nervous system and our practice. So the same primal energy that leads to the fight, what we call it fight, the aggressiveness. On the other hand of it, when given the right condition, when nourished and honored and embraced, it actually leads to these qualities of like these athletes, their effort leads to productivity, and they have great control of a situation. And on the intellectual realm, the doing is not only with our physical body, but also with our intellectual body that turned into a great strategist, problem-solving experts. These kind of qualities that are associated with the primal energy behind the fight.
Beautiful. Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
just touch in on each of them then, coming over to the flight side.
Yeah. The flight side is our ability to like rise above the whatever situation we're in. You can see this young monk here standing on a mountaintop. So we always we can remember we have a way to kind of, when we're in struggling, we're in stress, we're like really being pulled down by the gravity of whatever situation. The primal energy behind the flight, of course, in our modern time, I'm taking the flight as a metaphysical way. There's no physical space to go anymore. Like, for example, something like climate change, there's no physical place you can go in the world that's you can flee away from. But in ourself, we can climb up to our kind of spiritual realm and gain a new perspective, and so that we can bring it down to create more spaciousness in the reality life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And then down here to fawning and allowing.
Yeah. So let's do the being first, because the allowing is the most difficult one. Yeah.
Okay.
So so the what I see the primal energy behind the freeze is actually our ability, our potential. It's a great resource, which I call the being. And you can see this picture here, this dad napping with the baby. And this is these two modes, being and allowing, are modes of our nervous system tends to be devalued, overlooked, neglected, and misunderstood by the competitive modern culture, competitive materialistic modern culture. So this is, being is simply just to be, like the best. We all sleep. In our sleepness, our body is regenerate itself. Our health, wellness is hinged on our ability to have that deep rest. And in that rest, we cannot. So this is in direct contrast with doing, with fighting. We don't strive anymore. We surrender. We we have to really trust our surroundings to be totally surrender to that deep rest. And this is actually if there's even deeper reality, is that in this mode it allows us to attune to the synchronistic aspect of the universe. So everything is going on its own accord and rhythm and flow. We don't have to strive and control and fight to get things done. So this is very deep Taoism. Nature kind of take care of things in a lot of aspect, and part of it was we just know be with part of that flow.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, then over here to allowing and fawn energy.
Yeah, so allowing, you can see that because allowing is on direct diagonal with the doing. So I think, especially in the kind of competitive industrialized culture, this allowing aspect of ourselves is very much being kind of disregarded. But in the culture I grew up with in China before the industrialization, actually there's a lot of this allowing energy, which is, you can, there's some stereotype of people like South American people, or there's more of a sense of go with the flow of life. So it's different than being. Being is complete rest and the stillness. But here there's movement, but movement is not initiated by me per se, by this individual ego, but just to identify, what are the larger movement in the world. Like in this picture, there's this wind, this windsurfer. And so going with the flow, going with the wind, and which requires a very exquisite and precise sensing of one's environment, and utilize that momentum in the environment to move and to go to places to achieve. I think in people talk about Wu Wei, the non-doing. In English, we translate it as non-doing, which emphasize the not aspect. It's not achieving things not by doing, but it didn't illuminate how does it achieve things. So allowing is actually the core of Wu Wei, non-doing. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love hearing more depth about that from you. So anything else about this chart before I bring us back together?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Great. So just going over this again, it just it's lovely. I just really love diving into this again. And I can imagine that some people, it might be exciting to hear this new perspective on these 4 primordial nervous system at the nervous system level. I can also imagine, that can be a little challenging because so many of us have come to see these terms like fight, flight, fawn, and freeze as negative. Like, I don't want to be in a freeze mode because I'm stuck. Or if I'm fighting, then I'm aggressive and, I'm going to, etc. So I'm just curious if you have any examples or any, it just personally or with people that you work with, how does that, how do you shift that? How do you come to embody the gift of it that you're saying and the opportunity?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I will start with myself. It's a long journey for me to begin to find the gift behind. For example, the freezing, the freeze energy. I think I discovered that first to get to experience that 10 years ago, when I first started embarking on kind of creating my own identity, my profession. That was when I was in direct contact with this just accumulated pain and stuckness, because I was part of the system that demands competitiveness, demands doing, demands performing according to a standard. So I would, I think my Taoist background kind of gave me that perspective to sustain my believing in that eventually I will get to the end of it. But the process itself, I have deep reverence to that anyone who's going through that process. I think it's no small achievement, no small feat. Then people, in 1,000 years ago, they crossed the ocean from southern Pacific Island to find Hawaii. It's that kind of a journey. Yeah. And there's so at that time. So right now I have lots of tools to help people or being part of people's journey to cross that ocean. When I first started, I think music, doing artistic, but when I say art, it means it's a different kind of art. It's not art for entertainment and performing, but to transform that deep pain and agony into expression of sound. And at the beginning, it sounds horrible. Like I'm fortunate to have this music teacher who really nurtured me that process. And so she created a safe space for me to feel free and supported to express from that place of agony and pain and freeze and the stuckness. And she took every piece of expression like a precious flower and leading me to show there's beauty in there. So even when I was like, in agony and some sound come out, and she would then come to the piano and say, so see, here's the melody of that sound.
Wow.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that example. Yes. I feel like that's something I haven't run across very much in general, with the different people that I work with or teachers that I work with. I very rarely hear anybody talk about the value of creativity and artistic expression in doing this work of the inner transformation.
Yeah.
I personally have been fortunate to have some people guide me a little bit, kind of similar to what you're describing. And that's something I'm really inspired to bring to people a little bit more because, I love, really emphasizing. So many of us think of art and being creative as just for entertaining other people, and that you have to become really super skilled or
it becomes another way of doing. It becomes another like a performance, and there's all this stress of do it wrong and I'm not good enough.
Because it can include so much, and it can include really, it can be very painful. I mean, the process, as you said, a long journey. There may be elements of it that are scary, or there might be grief and vulnerability that comes. But and it's so much about context too. Like you mentioned, your teacher, or the person that was kind of helping you see, she helped create that context, and just at the right timing brings in the piano and shows the music that's there that can become this blossoming flower. And for me, that is a part of what like opens this new door to working with those primordial energies, that makes the shift from seeing it as, oh, I'm stuck in the freeze mode. I've got to get out of that. Otherwise, I'm not okay.
Right.
And that's actually where I started. I was in a freeze mode for so long. I really it was suffering. I wanted to get out of that.
Yeah.
And I don't put down anybody for wanting, to kind of get a shift to happen.
Totally. Yeah.
But eventually I realized that as you put it, there's wisdom and there's a gift within that freeze mode or the fawn mode.
Yes.
And it really takes this willingness and the right context for finding that gift and play and having relations with people who understand or who are interested in your story. Creativity, those are all, ways that can help with that.
Totally. So, well said.
I'm wondering if you want to say anything about any other of the ways that you do this. Like, I'm going to have to ask about playback if you want to talk about playback a bit.
So I'm very grateful that my teacher Kaya guided me through my own personal journey to discover the gem behind each of these fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And I feel like my purpose and what draws my passion is to learn how to weave a environment, a culture, like what you just said. It's so important. So let me put my dogs out.
Speaking of environment and
speaking of the environment, right? So and I for me, it's so important to weave in our social environment I grew up in, especially after the the industrialization start to intensify, there's so much like standard judgment, criticism coming from outside, and eventually it become my internal structure. And wherever I go, I bring it. There's all these, my teacher, my father, all the people who conveyed this were in me. So yeah, so how do we? So right now in my work, I'm basically trying to do what my teacher Kaya did to me, but also learn how to create with that container for people to come in. Because even if there's only a few people, even if there's only 4 or 5 people, that when we settle into this container, I call it a womb, a womb-like social environment where we cherish each other's freeze and fight. And even the fight, we can, I'll talk about that later. But I'm saying that when we have this container of new mutual nourishment, nurturing, honoring, whatever voice in you, it may be dark, it may be twisted, it may be insidious, selfish, we trust deeply there's a gift behind whatever voice in us, and we each take our own responsibility for that. Then that womb like social environment is very, very potent and life-giving and generative and regenerative. Yes. So yeah.
I love that you're bringing that in, because so many people it's sort of automatic. We think we have to do it all by ourselves. We have to do all this work by ourselves, or we have to pay, a special professional in a secret setting, and they're going to fix us. And
I
love that you're bringing that in, that kind of more holistic, integral integrating culture. And yes, is there more you'd like to say about that? Creating that environment.
Yeah, so you mentioned this playback theater. So this is one of the practice we do, which is, for example, if I feel something aggressive in me, like if I had a fight with my partner, and there's part of me is like really want to retaliate, and of course it's not safe to do it on my partner. I wouldn't recommend that on anyone. However, when I create a safe setting where I trust that people can hold whatever my energy, the expression of my energy as is, they don't have to fix it, then so that's what they call the power of witness. I can like really physicalize this anger and this desire to like punch back and retaliate or whatever, in a kind of like, it's almost like you can think it as a experiment. I experimented out like in a play act kind of scenario. I play out this primal energy by really physicalizing it, by giving myself to it. Then the power of witness will guide me to find what is it that I want to create with this energy. Then I go back to the original scenario where this energy is being triggered. I'm not controlled by my anger, and I don't have to hurt other people and myself anymore. I become a creative agent.
Yeah. And then in that, if you're doing this with a small group, a playback group, can you say any more about, besides just the witnessing, how that works in the playback theater?
Yeah, playback. So basically, when I tell the story of having a conflict with whoever, coworker or partner, then there will be 3-4 actors who pick up the different aspect of my story, and it's pick up my experience in the story and physicalize it, embody the anger or the pain or a grief, so that I can witness myself. So imagine that, when we have the intense experience, we have all these stuff in us that we cannot see ourselves, and they're amorphous. And now suddenly it's in front of you, in your eyes, and it's real, it's tangible. It's your friends who are showing it. It's hard to describe with word. Every time people do it, they feel like, wow, this is magical, because you immediately feel like a load of burden is being unburdened from your chest. And also, I think a very key thing is that part of what makes us really stuck in this the stuck version of the the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, is we are trained to believe these struggle are mine and solely mine, and I'm alone in this. And really, it's not. It's universal. Yeah, it's universal in a way that if you see it, other people express it, other people can recognize that in themselves.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I want to stay with this just a little bit more, if that's okay with you, because I have experienced this under your guidance and Joe, when you have brought that to our group, brought this modality of playback. And just to add a little bit more to it, so when I brought something to the group, this is something I feel stuck with, or I'm struggling with, or it's just really going on for me right now. And it does start as a story, I'm just describing, the scenario or what I'm feeling, and usually pretty brief. And as I'm describing that, people can hear and feel, they're empathizing, they're understanding what's going on with me. And then when the players, or the actors, as we call it, my friends, really, they're going to now reflect that back to me. But they're going to it's nothing like we rehearse it or get perfect with it. It's very spontaneous, in that each person will like tune into something that really stuck out for them about my story. And when they play back, they just will play that element, but they'll do it in their way. So they can't help but bring something of their own life into it.
Right.
And each person does that.
Right.
And as I view that, as I hear and see my story, and it's so much more than just words. In fact, that's part of what's magical about it, is I feel the body and the emotions moving, and the sounds, so it's way more than just the words. And then it's always amazing to me. A lot of times it's funny, it's like fun. It's like, wow, this is amazing. And I don't feel so alone with it. Just that in itself, that other people can hear it and they understand, or they have their own, you can tell that other people also probably have those same feelings to some degree or another. So it's part of that quote magic, and the way that it transforms us is that we don't feel as alone. We see all these different ways of viewing the issue, and that right there helps, that there's movement in it, and it starts to transform and gives me different perspective. And well, just from there, that in itself is huge. So, and it's fun, and it's fun. It can also be painful and scary, but those aren't the biggest part. That's not, you don't get stuck in the painful, scary. It just gets all mixed in with love and, fun and beauty. A lot of times it's incredibly beautiful when you see other people moving it.
And that's the thing, is that even some of I think that's the magic of art, kind of like when I make that sound of agony, my art music teacher will show me the music in that. And same thing, when we see our very painful experience, there's a beauty in there. It creates this multidimensional space that we don't have to be so tight about whatever we're experiencing.
Yes. And it's so healing for that thing that a lot of us in the West anyway have, of feeling isolated and alone.
Yeah.
So what is there something else you'd like to share on this, any of this stuff that we've been talking about?
Um, there's my mind is going to all many different directions.
Yeah,
um, I think it's I feel pretty good about what we shared so far, and maybe just emphasize. I love your description of playback. Uh, I think what I want to go a little deeper is that a lot of time the suffering comes from we are interpreting our experience certain way
yeah,
instead of really actually experience it.
yes,
And that has to do with our mental structure, our sense making, meaning making capacity. It compounds the pain. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah,
So a big aspect of Resonance Path Institute is to shift that identity that made through, the words and mental construct to to actually regenerate the integrity of feeling. We have this capacity to feel uh, ourselves and feel the environment, the aliveness and the agency of other beings in our environment, and the relationship, the subtle ebb and flow and the change in our relationship, and that hinges on how we can really feel the integrity of our feeling. But when we pile our feeling experiences with interpretation that doesn't really serve the relationships, then that's when the suffering happens.
yes.
So yeah, so in our work my partner Joe and I, we do sit down with people one-on-one, in the traditional kind of one-on-one setting to help people to really understand the feeling capacity, the feeling as an important honing device,
Mhm.
in navigational device in life. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you say some more about that then, how you work with people one-on-one? Is there any, can you just give us a little more of a picture of how you do that? So many
Yeah.
of are living in our heads, our minds, and all those stories and identities. So how do you work
Yeah.
with people one-on-one?
Yeah. So, well, my work is split between group work and one-on-one work. So I think we focused a lot on the group work,
Mhm.
but in one-on-one work, I use different modalities. One of them, that's the primary one, that's um, uh, consistent with what we just talked about, is what my partner Joe developed called the feeling work, where we kind of like for example, a client came to me um, talking about she's stressed about certain. She's a group leader, and she's stressed about certain aspect of her work. Then I will like a slow down, like really enter into a slowed down and contemplative space and help her to tease out what is she feeling, what's the stress about, and the stress behind the stress, there's a anticipated some kind of failure, and and in that failure, what is the feeling of it? So not going to the story, but actually bring that experience back into our body. Use the sensation of failure to inform us how to embody, how to actually go into the gift of the being.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and allowing, because as a group leader, she needs to read the room. She needs to read the subtle sign, the unspoken uh, concerns, wishes of other people, and so to do that, we really have to go through this, what we think is painful feeling, emotional experience, and really to receive the gift of it. So it's kind of like we call it like a interactive mindfulness process. It's really slow down the speeding of the mental activity and going to the felt sensations of experience.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
You. I love hearing how you apply this. And yeah, so do you find there are any challenges as you do
Mhm.
this work? Anything really difficult? So just curious, what kinds of
Yeah,
challenges you find in doing this work with people?
yeah, yeah. Great question. Because a lot of challenge. So the not a lot of challenge. Um the challenge is immense. That's what I meant. Because we are our and when I say challenge, it's like the collective consciousness. Sometimes I feel like I'm the like one cell, and yet I can find my wellness and well-being in a relatively small, my own micro environment. But when I reach out to think about the bigger collective body, it's there's because we're fighting against like century old, thousands years old uh, paradigm of that's as a result of, I think, thousands years of patriarch, and as a result of last several hundred years of capitalistic development, and this way of thinking that it's our relationship with nature is very much our relationship with our own nervous system. um, our relationship with nature is we extract things without giving back, and that's exactly what's we happen to our own nervous system. Is we do perform, make things at cost of our own uh,
Yeah.
damage to our own nervous system, and we're constantly so we are fighting, pushing back a huge I feel like sometimes like where people like us are like a salmon swimming upstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So really, we might be getting near the end of our time here, but I want to make sure if there's anything else that you feel is really valuable that you would love to share. Any suggestions on how to apply any of the things you've shared with us, or anything else you want to share?
Mm. I think the when I hear your question, the word come to my mind is really trust, a deep trust. Because we have, both you and I, we develop this professional presence, and we can bring a lot of tools and ways to group work or individual work. However, that is only play a supportive role. I think the primary thing that makes difference is trusting, is the power that comes with a deep trust of life, trusting that however painful it is, there's a if when we go through it, when we can dive to the experience of it, there's life on the other end of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, I love that. Deep
And the
trust.
life does. Sometimes I think I mistaken that as my, so it's not like I will have my expected results on the other hand. It's
Yeah.
something that is different. It's like, you give birth to, when you have a child, he's not gonna, they're not gonna come out as the way you expected.
Yeah.
They're gonna be different. They're gonna be their own
Uh-huh.
life, being agency. So the trust is something will come out of it that has life, and it probably will be different than what you expected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for me, that as I'm listening to you and bringing that word trust, the whole concept of trust ties back to what you were saying in the beginning, that seeing the nervous system and these different states that can be different energies, different states, really as that they hold a gift, they hold gifts, right? They're like portals into new possibilities, which is a wonderful, that definitely can, when I'm aware of that, I just naturally feel more trust. Because maybe earlier on, when I was first becoming aware of my own nervous system, and I see this in people who are discovering this kind of work with the nervous system, is at first there's a strong desire to change or fix the nervous system. Even the fact that we name these states in a somewhat negative way, fight, flight, which I would prefer to find different terms for that myself, but it's sort of now become the normal language. But making that shift to seeing that they're just their energies, their primordial energies, and how can we work with them and discover their wisdom and their gifts and move forward into our lives. So that's definitely brings a quality of trust.
There's one little addition I want to make is that so these four energies, they also move and shift into each other. So it's not to say that a fight energy will automatically shift to a doing or vice, any of these. So often I experience something like extremely committed to be aggressive in me. When it actually shifted, it becomes a deep being, deep resting stillness energy, and like vice versa, the stillness can shift it to a more active, creative energy. So so there's more fine. So what we presented here is the first layer, and there's many layers underneath it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you're saying there, because I find that too, as I teach the work around the nervous system, like I have to start at the level of taking everything apart as if they are different or distinct from each other. When actually in the real living experience is they're very dynamically interacting with each other.
Totally.
Changing and shifting and blending, and that's hard to describe, right? And when we're first learning about it, we kind of separate them so we can so that we can really distinguish them. But then when you start to experience how they move, and even from one second to the next, it's dynamic. It's like a dynamic dance.
And it's almost like, our experience is always multicolored. If you think of these four as four different color, it, almost always it's multicolored, but at different time, will be one hue comes out. Like sometimes the picture may look like red and more blue or more yellow. So I think these four is really like flavors or colors that it can take predominant position in our awareness, but they're always interexchanging, interrelating.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that seems like a really nice place to end on.
Totally.
Well, I love this conversation with you, and thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom, your beautiful way of describing and sharing this with us. And I love to see what's going to come next for you, what your next offerings are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's thanks for being a very graceful host for me.
You're welcome. Okay. Bye, Spring.
Bye.